In September of 1951, a brand new African American senior high school and junior college opened its doors in Montgomery County, Maryland. Deserving a worthy name to represent all the achievements that this new school promised, a naming contest was held. The winning name was George Washington Carver, an African American who surmounted many obstacles to achieve an education and international acclaim as a scientist and educator. A gentle genius, George Washington Carver's greatest desire was simply to improve the lives of poor people across the entire southern United States. As a scientist, inventor, educator, painter, and statesman, George Washington Carver firmly believed that God was a collaborator in all of his many endeavors and accomplishments. George Washington Carver was born a slave in 1864 near Diamond Grove, Missouri, at the end of the Civil War. He was orphaned and raised by his slave owners. As a young boy, he loved music, painting, and nature. He enjoyed working with plants and had a magical way of making flowers and crops grow. He became known as the plant doctor.
He could revive dying plants or a dying field. And a good example would be that many people did not understand the concept of crop rotation, the idea that you can't just keep growing the same crop over and over and over, because that crop will eventually leach all the nutrients that it needs out of the soil and then won't grow. Now, George Washington Carver didn't learn the science of that until he went to school, but he was a very keen observer, and he would notice what was growing in and around together, and he could see that if you put certain plants with other plants, they would all grow better. That was part of his sort of, he had a scientific bent of mind. He was a experimentalist. He would look at things and he would try and see if he could get them to work, and was enormously successful at growing things.
With sheer determination and an intense love of learning, he pursued an education. Often penniless, he traveled to the few schools and colleges that would accept African American students. He earned a Bachelor of Science and a Master of Science in Agriculture from Iowa Agricultural College, where upon graduation, he became the first African American on the college's faculty.
It was almost unheard of to have black faculty members training not just black students, but white students at the school. George Washington Carver in part becomes famous because he is emblematic of the first generation after slavery. So he starts enslaved after a tremendous struggle to achieve education. He was a naturally brilliant child who, through this social environment in which African Americans are struggling for education, he embodies that struggle because he personally struggles and eventually becomes a chemist, an agricultural scientist.
Through his research at Iowa, Carver became known in scientific circles throughout the United States as a bright agricultural chemist. In 1896, Booker T. Washington appointed Carver as the Director of Agriculture for the Tuskegee Institute, where he worked and taught until his death in 1943.
When Booker T. Washington invites George Washington Carver to join the faculty, you have a very important coming together of two of the most important and interesting African Americans of their time, because Washington then is recruiting one of the best known agricultural scientists in the United States to come to his institution to train students so that they can go out and be better farmers, so that they can support their families and be pillars of their community, but also to give George Washington Carver a laboratory and the opportunity to experiment and invent and innovate and to try and come up with new solutions to age-old problems.
Among his many accomplishments, Carver contributed to the rural economic improvement in the South by offering alternatives to the soil-depleting traditional crops of cotton and tobacco. By introducing the concept of crop rotation, Carver suggested planting peanuts and sweet potatoes. This method of crop rotation brought the needed nutrients back to the soil, saving southern farming. But the farmers did not know what to do with the abundance of peanuts and sweet potatoes their now healthy fields yielded. Carver quickly went to his lab and soon discovered 325 uses for peanuts and their byproducts, to include peanut butter, milk, ice cream, paper, oils, ink, soap, glue, and cosmetics. He also found more than 100 new products from the sweet potato, such as vinegar, molasses, soap, postage stamp glue, and rubber.
He begins to innovate, begins to suggest innovations in how to make farms, but particularly the kind of family farm or small farm that African Americans were likely to be able to buy and to farm in those years, how to make them more productive, how to do more with their farm products, how to create different kinds of saleable products so as to sustain the ownership and the financial viability of these family farms.
His ceaseless imagination for using foods to make both food and non-food items made his name a household word. The U.S. military and industry used many of his products and ideas. Carver did not benefit financially from his patents and inventions. He gave freely of his discoveries to mankind. "God gave them to me," he would say about his ideas. "How can I sell them to someone else?" His scientific breakthroughs drew the attention of other inventors such as Thomas Edison. Edison offered him $100,000 to work for him, but Carver refused. U.S. Presidents Calvin Coolidge and Franklin Roosevelt visited him at Tuskegee Institute. Carver also had friendships with Henry Ford, the car maker. In 1916, Carver was asked to join the advisory board of the National Agricultural Society. In that same year, he became the only African-American member of Great Britain's prestigious scientific society, the Royal Society for the Arts. In 1918, he was appointed as a consultant to the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Both white and African-American groups honored Carver.
George Washington Carver wins a tremendous number of awards in his lifetime. Some are awards specifically for his scientific activities. Other awards are given to him because he is a noble embodiment of the best that a human, but particularly an African American of that time, can achieve. And so when the NAACP, for example, gives him its highest award, the Spingarn Medal, they do so because they feel that he represents a pinnacle of scientific but also personal success, that he represents a kind of ideal that others should strive to emulate. So Carver is one of the most honored African Americans of his time.
Carver was elected to the Agricultural Hall of Fame and was the second African American enshrined in the Hall of Fame for Great Americans. The American people are reminded of his importance at the George Washington Carver National Monument in Diamond Grove, Missouri, his birthplace. There, one can see his humble beginnings as a slave, his artwork, the paints he made from clay, the many products he had made from plants, and the contributions he made to agriculture and to Black history. George Washington Carver's life and his accomplishments have been commemorated in countless ways. Museums, parks, and schools dedicated in his memory. A United States postage stamp created with his image. A wide range of books written about him. A $50 minted in his honor, statues commissioned, and even a naval submarine christened with his name.
George Washington Carver goes from being a poor enslaved person to being world famous. He goes from a situation of tremendous deprivation to getting a tremendous education as an agricultural scientist. He embodied a kind of humility and nobility that people saw as that augmented his fame because he was able to be so humble while he was in fact so accomplished.
George Washington Carver was a humble man whose needs were small, but who made great contributions to society. When he died on January 5, 1943, he was buried near Booker T. Washington on the grounds of Tuskegee Institute. His gravestone aptly reads, "He could have added fortune to fame, but caring for neither, he found happiness and honor in being helpful to the world." Carver believed that African Americans should pursue their goal of equality through education and economic development. In 1951, the naming of this new high school after this compassionate and brilliant African American served as an inspiration. The Carver High School building still stands today as a reminder of the struggles and achievements of not only George Washington Carver, but of all those students and teachers who passed through its halls.